Good afternoon and welcome to our Thought Leadership seminar on societal impact. How can we understand, evaluate and stimulate it? My name is Liam Clear and I'm the Senior Manager for Research, Analytics and Impact here at University College Dublin. And I'd very much like to welcome a colleague from Oslo, Professor Gunnar Sivertsen, who is going to present the main event today, which is the seminar on how we can understand, evaluate and stimulate impact. Professor Sivertsen is a research professor and head of bibliometric research at the Nordic Institute for Studies in Innovation, Research and Education in Oslo. And he has established bibliometrics as a field in Norway since 1989. So he's very, very experienced in the area. And also he's got very wide experience on research impact and how it pertains to policy, not just in Scandinavia, but across the world. So our agenda for today, I'm going to briefly introduce a research impact toolkit, which is a new resource that we've put together to help researchers plan, capture, communicate and monitor impact. And that will take about 10 minutes. Then the main event, which Professor Sivertsen will bring us through, is his presentation. That will take 40 to 50 minutes. And we'll follow that by some questions and answers. So in total, we're looking at, an hour to an hour and a half of your time today. So thanks again, everybody, for coming along today and joining in our seminar. So first, to introduce our toolkit. So this toolkit helps researchers to plan, capture, communicate and monitor their research impact. And as a way of background, impact at UCD and in Ireland, back in 2013, we put together a subgroup of our university kind of team that looks at research policy in the university. And we looked at how to capture, communicate and monitor impact. And really beyond looking at publications, we published this report in 2014. And on the back of that, then it got incorporated into the university strategy. And there was a work program created to move the impact agenda forward in UCD. So this has led to some fairly practical projects and interventions in the intervening years. One of the significant ones is we have an annual impact case study competition where we invite researchers to submit their research impact case studies. And to date, we've created about 60 different written case studies that are available on our website. And we've also worked with the academics who produce these impact case studies and produce some videos to go along with the impact case study. So about 20 videos created. And another outcome from our Beyond Publications that our impact kind of program of work are the Research Impact Seminar Series, and also the creation of a Research Analytics and Impact team in 2018, and hiring our first Research Impact Officer then a couple of years ago. So the project background then. The Research Impact Toolkit. In 2019, UCD was awarded some funding by the Higher Education Authority to develop our impact resources and to share them with other higher education institutions in Ireland. So we collaborated with Ireland's wider research sector, supported by the Irish Research Council, to produce the Research Impact Toolkit. And I'd like very much to thank our collaborators on the project, which included 7 universities, 5 institutes of technology, the Irish Universities Association, and the Technological Higher Education Association. So we had a lot of input into our impact toolkit, and I'd like to acknowledge that input. and to thank everybody who gave us all the feedback on it. The toolkit itself is available at ucd.ie/impact toolkit. And what you will see when you click on that link is this homepage here, which contains a nice video that introduces the toolkit and what impact means. And also there's kind of an overview of the content of what's in the toolkit on this homepage as well. And how the site is constructed really is around 4 major areas: plan, capture, communicate, and monitor impact. And in planning, we're very much talking about how to identify the benefits from your research and how to engage with people to create impact. In capturing, then, we're looking at tools and guides to help capture the evidence of impact. And in communicate, then, we look at what makes a good impact statement and a good impact case study. And finally, in the monitor section, we put forward some tools and methods which can be used to track the overall impact of your research and where that research is used beyond the normal sort of citations and academic journals. So, impact challenges. Now, one very important thing that we talked about when convening our group to look at creating the impact toolkit were some challenges that occur when we look to assess research impact and to kind of describe it. So there are a number of methodological challenges then. There's the usual challenges around attribution and how to say, you know, how to basically kind of attribute what the research has caused in terms of the impact and how much you can claim of that impact. There are some counterfactual positions, like questions like, if you didn't do the research, would that impact have happened anyway? So was it really instrumental in the impact and its occurrence? We looked at time lags and acknowledged that for lots of different types of impact, it takes time. And for basic research, the things that impact can take a very long time, in fact, but for more applied research, it can that is closer to market or closer to the beneficiaries, it can take less time. And then there was the overall kind of view on where to focus attention, and do we look at projects or individuals or groups of individuals or whole institutions or big questions that are being worked on internationally. So how to bring all these things together. And allied to this, major funding bodies around the world, including SFI, Irish Research Councils and the EU, now consider impact to be a fundamental aspect of the research programs. So our toolkit and our approaches need to respond to these, to the funding agency requirements also. I think we also acknowledge that there are many different pathways to impact, and that there are many different routes on how to get to a really strong impact. And that there could be hundreds of factors involved, of which the research is just one element of causing an impact. So these are just some of the challenges that we came across when we met with our group and when we decided to try and put our impact toolkit together to help researchers in their impact journey. So that brings me on to the main presentation today from Professor Sivertsen. And Professor Sivertsen will look at societal impact as in its broadest sense and really pose some questions around how we can understand, evaluate and stimulate it better. And specifically, how we can understand relations between academia and society, how we should compare individual and organization level activities, what value do we give to everyday impacts compared to extraordinary societal impacts, when are metrics more appropriate than case studies, how we can use metrics responsibly. So today, Professor Sivertsen will draw on decades of experience to unpack these difficult questions, providing insights from Norway and Sweden, and also his experience of applying the UK REF and the impact case study methodology. So I'd like to hand you over then to Professor Sivertsen, who will bring us through our main presentation for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. So, can you all hear me and see my presentation?
Yes.
So, yes, thank you for inviting me all the way to Dublin. I wish so much I could make the distance, but I have to do it this way anyway. But perhaps some other day I'd like to come and visit you. My presentation has a circular outline. I will explain why. I want to start with this question addressed by Liam, how to stimulate societal impact, and talk about the impact toolkit. And then lead on to how to evaluate societal impact, and then talk about existing methods to evaluate societal impact. And this discussion will lead on to the more basic question, how to understand societal impact. And then that will provide a better basis to return to the question, how to evaluate societal impact, and also how to stimulate societal impact. I very much like the impact toolkit, and I'd like to start by explaining why I think it's a good idea to have this implemented. Because it answers some of the question, how can we stimulate societal impact? First of all, it has a broad and very inclusive understanding of impact. It covers all schools and areas of research at your university, which is important in a general university. Usually, by tradition, it's been mostly about economic impacts and technological change. But in this understanding of impact, all can feel included, as they should. I also think it's a very useful, handy structure for project planning. So you add the impact dimension to the plan. And it's in a kind of good formula for writing impact statements. They are necessarily prospective. They are used in context where we apply for external funding, for example. But they also can also be useful for writing narratives and document impact in case studies. That is often retrospective. We tell about an impact that happened and relate it to our research. It's also good as an organizational tool for achieving increased resources from external funding. As I mentioned, this is required both at the national and European level in most countries now. And it creates visibility and examples of third mission activities. We get really good examples to tell our surroundings and society, what we provide for society. And it increases the general consciousness in the organization about societal contributions and outcomes. Now, to the often asked question, can it be measured? And also, I want to share my experiences with writing such an impact case study for an evaluation and tell you what came out of that. Of course, as a quantitative scientist, I have speculated and also consulted literature on the question how it can be measured or whether it can be measured. And these are my conclusions so far. I think direct measurement of societal impacts is not possible or of limited value. There is a lot of macroeconomic modeling going on, and it always shows that what we do at universities is very important for the economy. But to take these examples into a measurement is not easy for several reasons. I will return to them, and Liam also mentioned some of them. It is still possible to provide evidence. And the example is, of course, these case studies that was invented by the ref in 2014 in the UK. But still, there are some problems with attributing societal impact to its origin in research. I will return to this. But what we cannot measure and what we cannot provide evidence of, we still can understand. So we can understand societal impact, we can evaluate, and I think we can still evaluate it, although measurement is difficult. In my field where we work with metrics, we've been concerned that altmetrics, studying the activity in social media, might help us measure the connection to society. But social media do not really reach out to society in the ways we usually reach out. It is a communication sphere closely related to academia. I don't find altmetrics promising to measure societal interaction. I find it promising to extend our view of the immediate impacts of our research, for example, among students and among each other worldwide. So there are some limitations here. And if I may return to the problems with asking for evidence, and you will recognize these from what Liam mentioned also. Causality is difficult to establish. Attribution is difficult to attribute one impact to a specific piece of research or a specific breakthrough. And this is also because research is international. So the activities and value chains are global. And then there's the time scale. I will give you an example of this and also how to document it again. My example of both the time scale and the attribution problem is this one. The research leading to the contraceptual pill. The research can be traced back to around 1915. Basic research in 3 different areas of basic medicine or biomedicine: physiology of reproduction, hormone research, and steroid chemistry. There, it was not united at that time, these areas, in the search for this solution. The research was not even aimed at creating a conceptual pill, but the basis for the research leading onto it was created at that time in different journals where the contributors came from, of course, different institutions and countries. But then it went out into an applied phase where you could see that it could be connected to research missions and research programs and funded as such. So you could see that the publications on the topic retrospectively were changing into more directed research towards solutions. And then these lines of scientific internal impacts from one publication to the next, they were united and there was an implementation. And until that time, the contraceptual pill was unknown to society. It was within science. But then it came out from the laboratory and became a cultural and societal changer, as we all know, which of course can be studied in a humanities and social science perspective. So this is just an illustration of the attribution problem, and that things take time, and they are sometimes not directed towards societal impact. Now, the REF methodology, as we call it, introduced in the 2014 version, it also soon influenced national research evaluations in Norway. The idea of evaluating societal impact was taken up in 3 evaluations. We do national research evaluations per area or field of research every 10 years, and it's rotating. So in this phase, it was mainly the humanities and social sciences. But they already decided to take this methodology into the next evaluation, which will be in the life sciences. And I work at one of those social science research institutes that were evaluated in 2017. So my director asked me to write one of the societal impact case studies that our institute was allowed to provide for the evaluation. So I had to write in a new genre of science communication. It was new to me. I think it was new to everybody after 2014. And it has a description of how to proceed. So in that sense, it's not difficult to follow. It has, again, as we talked about, a very broad definition of impact. It covers all types of impact. Thereby, of course, it can cover all aspects of societal relations at general universities. That's a good thing about it. They even illustrate it. There are so many pathways to impact. And in the end, they may be both economic and societal. But there is a difficulty with this template, with the genre. They are asking for the research. You have to document the research that underpinned the impact. And then you have to document the resulting impact. And this is where I got the problem. Because this is the linear model of innovation and communication. It says that it starts within research, or it starts by research being funded. And then in the end, it moves to societal impacts after a transition from basic research to application. And it's like the linear model of communication, which is also relevant here. Are we just talking to society? Are they just listening? So, and is this really how societal impact happens? So I got trouble with the genre. I almost feel that I was back in literary research where I started. So the question is it really about something impacting something else? Like in this illustration? Is impact the right word to describe these interactions that our impacts are created from? Of course, when we plan impact, like in the impact toolkit, these are the steps that we need to describe in a plan. So in a way, we need to make use of the linear model. But I was asked by my director to describe and document an impact that already happened. And now at this point in my presentation, I'm afraid of telling you, a bit afraid of telling you what that impact was, because it also impacted your university in the end. Some years back, I created a Norwegian model for measuring research activity in relation to performance-based funding. And it was implemented in the basic funding of universities, research institutes, and research hospitals in my own country. And then Denmark went on to implement it with their own modifications. Finland did as well, and Flanders in Belgium. And it inspired a redesign of the Polish model. And then we have this local adaptation in an output-based research support scheme at your university that Liam and Lai have published about in this Chinese journal, where we all got these applications together in one special issue. So this is what I wrote about in my impact case story. And as you know, it's controversial. It's not just a nice case of impact. It's still controversial. But I could then describe at least a responsible interaction. It was not really the impact of a piece of research done by me. It was the results of responsible interaction between research and society during a co-creation process. So I created it based on the competence that we have developed over 30 years at my institute. And this is according to the purpose of our institute, which is to do applied research useful for society. And then I interacted both with the government and with the research performing institutions themselves. And they, particularly the research performing institutions at the level of deans in all areas of research, they were responding to my suggestions and they were influencing the model until it was finished and ready to be implemented. So the linear model does not really work here. Okay, I now turn to how to understand societal impact, and that was on the basis of seeing that this linear model was not really working. And also the case study genre was problematic, at least for me. It might not be, I mean, it may be very useful where we have clear relation between research and impacts. But I saw the need to describe this more as an interaction than an impact, and also to move from my individual level to the organizational level. So I made two distinctions. I said that we need to look at normal societal interaction, not just the extraordinary societal impact that these case studies tend to be about, because they are selected for competition in research evaluation. And then move from the individual level of evaluation thinking, which is the basis of the REF, although it's about funding organizations, up to real organization level perspective on this. And I'll give 4 examples to illustrate these two distinctions. 2 of them are from clinical medicine and 2 are from classical archaeology. So, I mean, extraordinary impact can be both negative and positive. So we have the Macchiarini case of fraud, which even resulted in the death of patients in Sweden some years ago. And the reaction of the organization, which is Karolinska Institute, was that they first disregarded various allegations against their scientists as this was going on. So we are at the individual level, and it's on an individual responsibility. It might be a positive impact, it might be a negative impact. Then they then it got into the media, and they chose to treat the case as an extraordinary exception and individual responsibility out in the media. So in my perspective, this way of thinking is the counterpart to only looking for extraordinary successful contributions from individual scientists. But finally, they took the responsibility as an organization and recognized that this case was a violation of the normal societal contract that you have in medical research with society, and that is there on a daily basis between Swedish medical research organizations and the Swedish society. And I think this organizational responsibility is valuable to think of also with regard to positive impacts. Now, my second example from clinical medicine is very simple. In most of our countries, we have something called HTA, Health Technology Assessment, and it means that all new drugs, medical devices, diagnostics, and surgical procedures need to go through a trial, an assessment, before implementation in a structured process, which is an organizational responsibility. It's organized as such. And so HTA is about a daily societal relation that research organizations take the responsibility of. It's an example of how you cannot just leave it to individuals. And I think that universities and other research organizations have these type of responsible relations at organized level in other relations than just clinical medicine. And I will give some examples later from UCD. Now, my first example from classical archaeology is Palmyra, the ancient city on the Silk Road, now in Syria. It's official UNESCO heritage. And this person, the Swiss Orientalist Burckhardt, is famous for his rediscovery in 1812 of the ancient city of Petra, which many of us has visited up to date. When visiting there, we all get to know his name. But according to his own account, he was no more than the first Westerner to be introduced to the hidden city. The natives had already been excavating and preserving the site as part of their societal life. So the extraordinary impact of Burckhardt as an individual in the history of archaeology was in fact based on the collective societal enterprise that cultural heritage protection normally is. My second example of classical archaeology is again Palmyra, because today investigations of the ancient Mediterranean civilizations are organized as large projects that are agreed with national authorities and funded from several countries and performed in international collaboration. So this was an example, this was a collaboration between Norway and Syria on documenting, again, this ancient UNESCO heritage. And it started in 2008 and proceeded as a normal international archaeological project. There are many of them. This is how archaeologists normally proceed in an organized manner. But then came the outbreak of the civil war, and Palmyra was bombed, and the Syrian director of the site was beheaded, while the Norwegians escaped. Now the former then documentation work that had been done before the destruction gained immense societal value and international interest. This project went from being normal impact to extraordinary impact. And it was evaluated as such in the Humanities Evaluation Report that came right afterwards. But I think that had not Palmyra been destructed, their work would have had the normal societal impact of the humanities that is often taken for granted or seldom receives attention, for example, in research evaluation. So I gave you now 4 examples for the 2 distinctions. And so it's about the organizational level and it's about normal impact as contrasted to individual and extraordinary impact. So from there, how to evaluate. Now I'm looking at the aims in your statutes, and I find so many of them that are expressing aims about what UCD will do in societal relations. In fact, most of the points in your statutes refer to societal gains of your work. So it's already there in your aims. It's already normal. It's already an organization responsibility. So how to evaluate UCD according to its actual responsibilities and not just according to good examples of what you do. Then we have to take into consideration that these general aims, they need to be interpreted differently among the colleges of a general university, because each field of research and each research organization has different and typical interactions with society. For example, educational research engages with the school system, while legal research engages with the legal system, and engineering research engages with the industry mainly. So these specific modes of interaction represent more specific organizational level purposes. I think that if you're looking at other research organizations in Ireland, for example, the specialized research institutes, you will see more clearly specified aims than the more general aims that you have at UCD. And in general, we all know that evaluation should relate to the purposes of the organization and advise on improvements. And thereby, perhaps organizations on both sides of the interaction should be allowed to speak to the evaluation. So in evaluating the relation between educational research and the school system, perhaps also the school system should be able to speak to that evaluation. When I look around in UCD, I find so many examples of organized activities that really point out to societal interaction or manifest. They are manifestations of societal interaction, and also of collaboration with other organizations in doing the same. So it's not one organization having one impact. It's uniting academia in relating to society. You see it in this example as well. It's not only UCD, and it's so important for society what this conference is about. And again, your research is organized to inform policy and practice. In such an important topics. And of course, you can see hospitals and medical research as parts of the same organization. It's needed both for education and research and for the purposes of the hospitals. These organizations are part of each other. And UCD is directly there for society. So I now end with my last topic, is returning to how to stimulate societal impact. I suggest that we focus on normal impact, not only extraordinary impact. Societal impact of research is normal and part of society. It's about daily activities and how well they are organized, not about individual incidents of particular interesting or impressive impact. Of course, the last category is interesting and valuable and worth telling about. But the question is now, what should be stimulated and evaluated? Then focus on relations and interactions. Perhaps we need to consider both sides of the relations between research and society. I think that the impact case methodology from the ref, it was of course created in a context where it's all about funding universities, where you're looking at the performance on one side, because it's about funding on one side. So the context where it was developed and designed is a kind of limitation of the outcome of the genre. And then we should understand the diversity of purposes of interaction, as I told with the examples from UCD, and then apply the organizational level perspective. So it's about strategies, infrastructures, management, incentives, and rewards, and the daily life of the organization. I'm not saying that individual level impacts are not important and should not be stimulated, but we need the organizational level perspective in addition. So thank you for attention. There is a publication out there that has some of the main points I made in this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Professor Sivertsen, for that very stimulating presentation on societal impact. And I think we have a few minutes now for questions and answers. So I'd like to invite everyone to use the Q&A button, or at least the chat button below, which I see some people are using already, to ask any questions that they may have. I can't promise we'll have answers for everything, but at least we can maybe discuss them a little bit more. So it's over to you now if you'd like to ask some questions. Okay, I can see we have a question up, and I'll just read out the question and then maybe we can consider it. So this is a question from Giovanna Lima from Trinity College, and the question is, could contribution analysis be a way to circumvent the limitations of attribution? Contribution analysis accepts that in order to create a credible picture of attribution, complexity is recognized, multiple influences acknowledged, and mixed methods used as gathering information. So I was just wondering, Gunnar, have you got any perspective on that?
Yes, my immediate reaction is that this, the contribution analysis makes it, of course, much more complex to document societal impact than this genre that I talked about allows for, which it implies that there is a direct relation between research and impact. But I think it needs to be complex as that. And as I said in my talk, if measurement and direct attribution is not possible, you can still talk about societal impact and understand it and value it and evaluate it. And with contribution analysis, okay, you get a richer documentation. So I agree.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very comprehensive answer. I'd just like, if anybody else has any other questions now, please feel free to enter them in. Okay, I think we have another question that's just come in from Emer Brangen. So let's see. So do you have any views on how universities can involve the public in their research impact?
Mm-hmm. Perhaps I should divide it in two. The public is represented in universities, in the governance of universities, often by external members. And not the least, you know, we never talk about that, but students represent a relation to society that is so important. And when you have the relation to students, you also have relation to their parents and families and their communities. So it is, of course, there are some good traditions for opening up and to the public, and have event days where you discuss major problems in dialogue between researchers and public audience. But I also, that's just why I want to distinguish. I also talked about organizations on the societal side. So there is both a public there, and there are some responsible organizations that in a way share purposes with universities. At least they need to be knowledgeable about what they are doing. I mentioned the school system as the counterpart of educational research. I'm not saying that education research is only there to be engaged with a particular school system, but there are organizations and authorities in the school system that could also talk or be in dialogue with and give response to and talk about the relevance of performed educational research. And I think many examples can be given of you know, the organized interest of the public, which is often a professional interest as well. And I want to focus on those relations as well.
Great, thanks. We have a few more questions that have just come in, and one is from Sarah McLaughlin. And Sarah likes your point on determining impact based on responsibilities. But the question really is how to gauge the responsibilities of the institute/individual. So how that might work, I suppose.
Okay. Now this goes right to the core of what a university is. Because unlike most other organizations where people go to work every day, so much is left to our own individual responsibility. It's an amazing freedom. We are not steered every day. So in a way, most of what is the Institute's responsibility is also our responsibility, and it's our own responsibility in how we deal with that responsibility. So I'm sometimes a bit afraid of talking about this organizational level perspective, because it might look as I'm taking away academic freedom and thereby individual responsibilities, as I'm seeing a university as a kind of commercial organization that has one aim, and that where all individuals need to relate to that purpose. So how to keep the academic type of individual responsibility in touch then with the organizational responsibility. And I think that what I'm afraid of, to make this too much an organizational responsibility, is not the main problem by tradition. I mean, too much is left to us as individuals to realize. And I think sometimes individual areas of research or institutes should consult their external aims and have a look at how they perform in relation to them. Yeah, I think if we want to stimulate impact at the university, I think the organization level should also be in mind.
Okay, pretty good. And we have a second question too from Giovanna Lima, and it's really around the whole incentivization and reward area, and it's how universities can acknowledge and incentivize and reward researchers for their engagement with societal stakeholders. And if you know maybe of any models or any ways that you've seen of how universities can do that.
There are two big discussions in Europe now. One is how to change the criteria for how we are assessed when applying for positions or promotions. And this is a problem that, for example, the European University Association is dealing with. It started with open science, but it's also moving into this question. And then there's the big discussion of how the external funding criteria, for example, at the European Research Council or the European research programs, which is also there at the national level. And that is, yeah, we can provide a CV in 2 pages. We can list some publications. And which publications do we list first? Do we list those publications that represent societal interaction, or do we list those publications that are in the main internal scientific journals? I think the perspective of societal engagement is being lifted, but not to the necessary degree yet in those 2 contexts. It's much easier to prioritize what they call excellence than to prioritize societal interaction. But I think it's important for a university at least to record publications that or activities that represent societal interaction, and also to think about the third mission when you recruit new people. Yeah, that could be a kind of short answer, but the main thing is that there are these 2 agendas. They are so difficult, also at the European level, but there are some signs of changes there.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we're probably all in agreement with that. And I'm just kind of wondering then, from the audience perspective, are there any other things that you'd like to kind of delve in further into and ask questions on, or are you happy to leave it where we are at the moment? So if there are any other questions, please feel free to ask them now. Okay, I see there's another one come in, and this is from Sarah Bowman. And the question really relates to Mark Taylor, the head of impact for the National Institute of Health and Research UK, says about impact that you don't measure it, you describe it, and then maybe some numbers to back up that description, but you describe it. So we're just wondering if you could share your thoughts on that statement. Do you agree?
Perhaps after I have shared my thoughts, some other people in the audience could share their thoughts on that statement to see how far we got in the discussion. I pointed out that it's difficult to measure, at least for the time being. And so the solution to what I call the UK ref genre is, of course, description. But I feel very much that this statement is made between this context and with this limitation. I think if I was to, why should only we describe our impacts? If it's about how the university and the hospital is working together, for example, with regard to education of nurses or the scientific basis for hospital treatment. Why don't these two organizations talk to each other as such? There's need for dialogue and just as much as descriptions. And also, perhaps a third party should come and observe how we relate. And that the description is not necessarily the description of our own description as researchers. Sometimes we could call in societal representatives and make them look around, both in their own organization and in our organization, about how this relation works. So in my view, it's not enough to say just that you should describe it.
I think that's a really good point. So you're definitely not in agreement there, and I think a lot of people will probably share that, and I think it underlines the kind of complexity involved with describing research, that it is more than just capturing a case study and saying, oh, we have some numbers attached to it and there you go, done. It's way more involved than that. So there's a question just come in, and it's from an anonymous attendee, and it's basically asked that, are certain types of impact better or perceived to be of more value than other types? So I think that's a really interesting one.
Yes, there's different valuation. There are different types of impacts are valued differently. And some fields of research feel that there are more in the spotlight than others with regard to what they can do for society. So my idea is that of evaluating organizations according to their different purposes is that you take into consideration what these fields of research try to achieve and how they interact, because these interactions will be different. But let me return to one point. Implicit in my presentation is a distinction between formative and summative evaluation. And we talked about the UK ref. It is, they say it's evaluation, but to me it's summative in the sense that you're looking back, you're giving degrees, and then these degrees can be put into a funding formula, and there it stops. But most real evaluations are formative. You do it to learn from them, and then to look forward. And this is why perhaps a description may serve a summative evaluation. Then you can get a kind of degree or rating. But the description would not be enough for some formative evaluation.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just wondering, we're coming up to the hour now, and if anybody has any more questions, I think we have a few more minutes. So please feel free to use the question and answer button below, and so we'll just give it another few seconds, that if something comes in, great. And
if we have time, I think if somebody in the audience would like to answer the same questions.
Okay, I think we've reached that kind of awkward pause where people are probably telling us that, oh, wait a sec, here we go. Another question, and this is from Sarah Bowman. And again, it's to do with the Mark Taylor, who's a proponent of public patient involvement and speaks to that engagement and involvement as fundamental to impact inquiry. So it's that co-creating and storytelling that matter more than chasing a perfect set of indicators. So it very much aligns with the formative evaluation and its relationship building focus. So I think that kind of just builds on your answer there, Gunnar, about, you know, that impact is more than just a description with some metrics, and it is co-creation.
Yeah, yes, I very much agree. It is nice that Sarah helped us in seeing it from that side as well, this statement.
Okay, got something in from Elizabeth Nolan. So Elizabeth, okay. Oh yeah, the anonymous question earlier on actually came from Elizabeth, but she doesn't want to be anonymous, so that's fair enough. So has Gunnar any advice then on how to overcome the perception of some types of impact being seen as too commercial and therefore not of interest to researchers?
Oh, no, I don't have a ready answer. I really understand the question. It's like with, you know, both being too commercial and not being commercial at all is a problem. There is something about the traditional value system in universities. You know, it's a long old heritage. Some value systems that sits in the walls, and that need to be changed. I think it should be seen as exciting in a university to have accounts of how you interact, even by commercializing. I think these activities can be inspiring, and these stories need to be told. But as I said early in my introduction, the main focus all those years was on economic impact. So in a way, so we have opened up for all types of impacts, but we should not neglect contributing to the economy either.
Thanks very much for that answer, Gunnar. We've another question now, and it's from Lima, and thank you, Gunnar, for pointing out the responsibility of universities and organizations, and not only the responsibility of individual researchers. What kinds of support do you think funding agencies and universities should nurture a culture of research impact with? What types of support should be provided?
I talked about the incentive systems, that they may lack the societal interaction dimension, or not have sufficient weight on it. But I think for researchers, economic incentives, as long as we get enough funding for research, economic incentives are less important than visibility and acknowledgement. And so we should also ask about how the funding agency follow up our impact statements. According to my experience, they don't follow them up at all. They just ask us to report. It would have been so interesting if these funding agencies had a kind of systematic look into what actually happened based on these applications that were successful, and perhaps even the unsuccessful applications as well. And universities can nurture this by putting societal interaction results into reports, to make them visible within and outside of the organization. I think such acknowledgement for individual researchers is just as important as being incentivized, as long as our external activities are recorded and acknowledged.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, that was not a very concrete answer, line, but it will suffice, I think. We can talk more about it later.
very good, very good. I think it's very hard to answer some of these questions just in one kind of go, and sometimes in terms of support being provided, I think I can talk from the perspective of UCD, but it is something that we do like to support more and more, and to nurture that culture of research impact. But I do have that feeling that we're very much kind of in our embryonic kind of stages in terms of our approaches and where we'd like to get to. So I think it's like you say, Gunnar, it's one of these things that we'll have to meet up on and work on maybe in more detail, definitely. So there's another question from Junwen Luo, and apologies if I pronounced your name incorrectly. But the question is, I would like to hear Gunnar's views on who should and can evaluate societal impact.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
And scientists ourselves from the same scientific communities, research users, industrial developers, collaborators, are actual beneficiaries from schools, hospitals, local communities, and so on. Who should really? Yeah.
I can give the answer that we gave 5 years ago. Sweden wanted to change its funding system, and they wanted to introduce a kind of ref-like model, including societal interaction. And we worked together with them, and we designed a model where there would be disciplinary committees evaluating scientific quality, and then there will be higher level committees also evaluating societal interaction, and those committees would consist both of senior scientists or responsible leaders and representatives from the outside. And we also have we have had a routine of evaluating the applied research institutes in Norway, and these evaluations have always had external representation. So I think it only makes sense to also listen to what we call users, but they are also collaboration partners and beneficiaries, as said here.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that's really something that we really want to strive for in UCD and in Ireland, I think, as well. And there's a new question has come in from Kate Morris, and she's delighted that you focus on the process and impact, but have you any thoughts on how we can capture and share information from research stakeholders, policymakers, industry partners, patients on the process to impact, like what worked and what didn't work, and really for the longer term societal impact?
Yeah, I sometimes wonder why we should document impact when the impact is out there. Why don't we document impact as it shows in society?
Yeah.
And we haven't come far enough with this documentation. I collected information and statistics for a recent evaluation, national evaluation of legal research in Norway. And I found that the legal system itself has a system for communicating legal issues in all types of documents. So legal documents are published not only by academia, but also by the legal institutions. And all these documents are related in one database, which also records the names of the references to academic publications when they are used in legal practice. And so in addition to some 100 scholarly publications, I looked into a database where I find 24,000 mentions of the same researchers in the legal system. I'm not sure that and we can collect data in the same way for all areas of research, but there is recordable activities going on out there. And with digital communication, I think we really need to look into sources of information that we then would not need to provide ourselves in our impact case studies. I've also been thinking that psychology should, or social psychology should design a test for organizations out there where they recorded or answered an easy questionnaire when they last time related to scientific information and in what form. You know, this would be for organizations that we rely on they are really knowledge-based, they should be. And also a kind of inventory of what kind of information that they subscribe to in their libraries, if they have one. Yeah, whether they have one is also a good idea. And then the responses from these organizations could be multiplied and made into a kind of standard where the organizations could compare themselves to the average performance of knowledge-based information in their area of society. And then we would have a competition to be better informed with an easy measurement. Then we could stop measuring ourselves. We would leave the measurement to them out there. They would measure the impact for us.
I think that's a
really a kind of funny end of the day idea, but it makes some sense, I think.
I think it does. I think there is a huge focus on trying to capture information and evidence and everything, but there is a kind of a limit to what's practical, I think, too. And I think there's also always a limit on what our partners in research are kind of willing to do. And but I think, yeah, more active involvement and more recording of that kind of co-creation process and co-researching and co-publication and co-problem solving is definitely the way to go. And I think it actually makes for a richer story, I think, around how the impact has occurred, and that it's not just a final outcome, that it keeps building. And I think that's the bit that I think we really need to focus in on, that, you know, impacts don't just stop. They should kind of keep building and growing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So are we ready for the last call on the questions at this stage? I don't see anything new coming in, so I think we've probably reached a kind of a natural conclusion then at this stage on the questions. So I would like very much to thank the audience for attending today and asking all those very challenging and very insightful questions. I'd like to do a really special thank you to Professor Sivertsen for your excellent presentation today, and I think you've given us all a lot to think about. So on behalf of UCD, I'd like to express our sincere thanks and appreciation for sharing your time and your experiences with us today. So thanks very much. And I'd like to really I think we can probably call it to a conclusion then and just say goodbye then on that note.
Okay, I also thank you very much. It was nice to be with you this afternoon and to talk about these questions. So thank you very much.
Thanks again. Okay. Goodbye then, everyone, and thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.